sometimes confusing your body massively from, say, not going outside enough and grounding, or eating weird food, or staying up all night with weird light. You're going to get anxious. You don't know what's going to happen. It's all confused. So for some people, sort of anxiety and mood problems come out when you confuse the body, by giving it things that it's not expecting, because we didn't evolve with those foods, or we didn't evolve with that kind of lighting.
Well, very warm welcome, Sarah, to the Your Body's Way podcast. And I was just telling you how excited I am to have you on this podcast, because when I was looking through your work in preparation for this chat, gosh, the stuff you talk about is so interesting. And I really struggle to find a topic that we could focus on today. But I thought we could kind of settle on the ketogenic diet and basically what you do. You call yourself a circadian ketogenic coach, which
Yeah, I'm actually board certified in something called quantum biology. So it's basically looking at biology and healthcare through a physics lens, because that fundamentally is what drives biology. It's sort of the paradigm has always been in the biochemistry and biology realm, whereas really it's physics that drives our bodies. And I just think it's really interesting. And also physics is something people hate at school, like maths, but it's actually really easy, I think. And it makes things, it's easier to wade through the minefields of what's out there online.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So at school, I hated physics,
Mm.
but I have to say, out of all of the sciences, I am the most interested in physics now. So whenever I see the word quantum, straight away I read, because I think it's becoming much more popular, don't you think?
Mhm.
Like people are becoming more aware and they're talking about it more. Is that what you're finding?
Oh, definitely. But fundamentally, if we think about fitness, it's all about biomechanics, which is physics, and jumping and interacting with the weights or pulling a band. Those are all laws of physics. Compare as you pull a band, the resistance gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Whereas with a weight, you have the same weight throughout. You just have to work through gravity. And having worked in movement, bad biomechanics is the route to just dreadful everything, from injuries to bad form to lack of sort of muscle gain and everything. So physics is, at the heart really of movement. And the same with plyometrics or jumping, or I used to teach gymnastics and I'd still do a little bit. I started as an adult. That's all about physics, how somersaults work and trampolines and things. So it's something that's sort of integral to society. And I want to change people's view to physics, because, yeah, I had a terrible physics teacher at school.
So how did you get into physics when you had such a bad start?
Well, actually, when I went to university, I did a degree in biochemistry and genetics, and then I did something called bioinformatics as a master's, and that was computer programming, and I was useless at it, but at least it taught me some tech skills. And there's a sort of mathematical and sort of physics way of thinking to computer programming. Then my PhD was in protein folding, and it was biophysics, so I was using light to shine it on individual protein molecules. And protein folding, just in simple language for people, relates to things like Alzheimer's or dementia, or um, uh, some aspects of type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's, CJD, things like that. It's when proteins don't fold up properly and work like a little machine. They just all stick together like a big clump. So that's how I sort of had to get back into physics. That was sort of light and lasers and photons, which again is really important for probably what will come up later when we get further into the podcast.
Yeah. I, like you said, I think about physics when it comes to movement, but when it comes to inside our bodies and how our cells work and how they produce energy, and I've never thought about applying physics to that, but that is what you specialize in. And when I look through your work, I try to follow it as much as I can, but I have to admit I glaze over because the level at which you teach is on a really sophisticated level. And what I'd love is to understand it today,
Mhm.
understand what you teach, because I just find it fascinating. I think it could be a way to kind of unlock a new way of looking at diet and eating and lifestyle. So you say that you're a circadian ketogenic coach. So I'm just curious, what is your diet? Do you eat a ketogenic diet or do you kind of flip in and out? What's your
Oh, yes,
usual?
yes, I do. Well, I've done all sorts of things over the years. I think I discovered the keto diet when I was at university a long time ago via the Atkins diet, when people thought he was just a complete crackpot, where he was actually a genius. And he didn't die of a heart attack. He fell, by the way, just we'll just put that out of the way because people like to say, oh, Dr. Atkins died from eating all that bacon.
His own diet, yeah.
No, he didn't. And he was actually way ahead of his time. And he was one of these sort of great thinkers that we only appreciate now he's not here anymore. And then ever since then, I've sort of experimented with a few other things. I a long time ago tried the pro-metabolic, the Ray Peat thing, and that ended up in a disaster because I'm very curious about things. And I have tried out veganism just out of curiosity because I'm not against anything. But as I've got older, I kind of think in a completely different way. So when it comes to circadian eating, I'll put it into sort of simpler terms to start with, because we have seasons, summer and spring and autumn and winter, and what actually grows and what the temperature's like then is completely different, especially in the UK. So, for example, in the winter in the UK, it's obviously cold and dark, and it's scarce, so there's not very much growing. And if we look at what animals and wildlife would do, the ones that can eat meat, they tend to fast. Animals that eat fruit and stuff as well, but they go into ketosis and fast. And so that would mean that a keto diet is very, very suitable for that kind of climate. And because in the UK it's actually cloudy a lot of the time in the summer, it just means that kind of way of eating would really suit the UK. And then when it comes to keto, I mean, we will go into it later about blood sugar and stuff like that and triglycerides, but other things raise blood sugar and triglycerides like electromagnetic radiation, as in too much tech and phones, and also artificial blue light. So because we
Really?
do live in a kind of blue lit microwave world, our bodies are already more insulin resistant or more, we've got, we haven't got the sort of metabolic flexibility that we used to have when there was no electric lighting. And I can't remember the exact data, but I think there are studies that people produce, significantly more insulin now to try and deal with the environment and the food than our ancestors did. So that just says also it's maybe it isn't a very good idea to eat a huge amount of carbs and sugar in the current environment that we have in any country, regardless of the sun. Because I was just talking then about a sort of winter diet, and then say if we think about something like the summer and the autumn, that's when all of the fruit and vegetables and everything grows. So it's a time of abundance, and I'm all about sort of eating seasonally and locally, because the way I think about everything now, I've got lots of ways of thinking about it, but I think about things as energy and information. So food's not just energy, but it's information. And like everything really is energy and information. The sunlight provides energy, but also information. And the information or the light that comes out of a bulb or a laptop is totally different information than what the sun gives. So we can think we can have, sort of junk light and then proper daylight, same as we've got junk food. And then we've got a proper whole food, because the junk food just provides sort of terrible information because it's all mushed together in a factory and it's had all sorts of things added to it. And the information it provides the body is kind of really confusing. And if we think about eating proper food, that say meat that's intact, all of the proteins in there have kept their quaternary structures, whereas protein powder, it's just a load of mush and it's lost its structure and some of its information. And then when it comes to eating fruit and vegetables, they provide information because they're programmed by light, because most people know that photosynthesis is something that plants do to make energy out of sunlight, and then they make food or fruit and vegetables. Then animals eat the fruit and vegetables and produce food for us. So the entire food chain is all tied to photosynthesis and light. So this light information that we take in, the way the body works, I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but when we eat food, we've got things in our cells called mitochondria that they want the electrons and the protons from the food to run what we would call the electron transport chain, which is basically just an electric current inside the mitochondria, and it produces water, which is actually our main form of energy, and ATP that people have probably heard of as energy. And it uses the electrons and the protons from food to run this process. So that's, in sort of simple terms, is why we need to eat. But also because food contains information, and our mitochondria are sort of like a little microprocessor. If we feed them weird food, they're not sure, whether what we're supposed to be doing. Are we supposed to be sort of exercising? What's this information? And when you get something called chaos in the body, it's just a biophysics word of saying inflammation. And most people are aware that inflammation, as in the chronic kind, not a bee sting, is terrible for health. So if we give our bodies poor information, we create chaos on a sort of biophysical level and inflammation. And the same as if we give our bodies poor information from food, it's going to create inflammation and chaos. And nobody denies that processed food gives people inflammation, and things like roasted nuts where the fats have been damaged, or seed oils, which are full of deuterium, which we'll go into. And also they're sort of an artificially generated kind of oil that our bodies are not expecting. And the other thing about biology is it doesn't like surprises. So according to my mitochondria, say if I suddenly ate a banana now, according to them and where I live on the planet, because the way that the planet works and light and everything, we do have an orientation of where we are, what season it is, because body clocks and timing is so vital for health. If I ate a banana, according to my mitochondria, that's impossible because there's no banana trees for thousands of miles. So that would create sort of chaos and confusion at a sort of cellular level. But then on a sort of economic level, it just makes sense to help local farmers that live near you not to ship in really expensive food because it's from other countries, because of the air miles. Also, we've got, we know all of the regulations around farming and stuff in the UK, whereas some other countries sort of use things like glyphosate, and they're maybe not as stringent of what gets put in food. So I'm all for the local and seasonal eating. And even if people can't grasp the concept of the physics, because it can take a while to understand this energy, and everything's information, and food is information, and food is light, really, because it came from photosynthesis. Just thinking about it, it's just better economically to support the local farms and eat things which grow locally. Because the other way to think about it is, we don't have a huge amount of sun in the UK. So the kind of fruit we have would be things like berries and apples, and they're not particularly high sugar, whereas things like bananas and mangoes are kind of super high sugar because they're designed to be eaten in a completely different environment, sort of more at the equator. And that's why ways of eating don't just depend on the person, it depends on their environment.
Sarah. Wow, that there are there's so many amazing points you just made. So when you say food is carrying information, and obviously, with all the accounts that I follow and all the study that I've done, yes, I get that. But the kind of information you're saying is, okay, so a food not only just gives you the nutrients, but then it also tells you what season it is, where it's located in the world.
Mm.
And I just find that absolutely fascinating. I've never thought about it in that way. So I suppose your thoughts on supermarket shopping. So just walking into a normal supermarket where you can get any fruit and veg you want from any part of the world. A lot of the time, the fruits and vegetables aren't normal fruits and vegetables as well. They've been created. So,
Oh yes, like broccoli's an invented vegetable, and so are pink ladies.
are you serious? Because I've heard
Yes.
that before. Are you saying broccoli is not real?
Yeah, and also carrots. The original carrot was purple, and now it's orange. But that's not necessarily a huge issue because people naturally bred them like that. Whereas I think the pink lady and the broccoli are sort of genetically manufactured, so they're kind of. But the thing is that on the other hand, even if it is genetically manufactured, as long as it gets grown outside without pesticides, it's just going to behave like a normal sort of vegetable. So it's not terrible not to tell people, not for people to get frightened of broccoli and think it's Franken food. I
Yeah.
think there was that flavor saver tomato that genuinely was are genetically modified, and then we've got lots of genetically modified soy, and corn was the original genetically
Yes.
modified, but the vegetables that we've kind of bred on purpose to be extra sweet, that's another problem, humans and breeding things to be sweet.
Mm.
They're sort of more traditional breeding. So yeah, I'll just let you go back to that about the real food,
No,
not real
I
food.
was just going to build on it. I was going to say that, the other day I bought watermelon and it had no seeds in it. And I was like, okay, so this is clearly not a real watermelon. Like this has been genetically modified. And the same with grapes as well, seedless grapes, genetically modified. I had a really interesting conversation with Jeffrey Smith.
Hmm.
And oh God, he is mind blowing. Like, I absolutely love that episode. But he was talking about potatoes and about how there's so many different genetically modified potatoes. And there was one potato particularly that was made to be cut and it wouldn't turn brown. And he basically said there was lots of studies on it that were covered up. The studies confirmed that they caused like genetic issues and illnesses and so on, but that evidence was kind of covered up. And it was just a really interesting story. But seeing as we're talking about genetically modified food and information, that food gives you information. It's like, what kind of information are we getting then? Like, it makes you question, if we're eating genetically modified foods and foods from all over the planet in different seasons, not local, what is happening to our body then?
Well, first of all, it's going to be confusing for the mitochondria, and they're sort of like our battery or our microprocessor, because everything we eat, when we talk about information, it's not like facts or stuff like that. We're talking about information in terms of IT, so it sort of creates a signal. So it's things like electrons, which would carry information, and they are sort of fundamental to our functioning. All chemical reactions, electrons and hydrogens move around, and all we do all day in our bodies is we move electrons about. So the more electrons we've got, the more and they also flow. Our bodies are sort of like a semiconductor which uses water. So the more electrons we've got, the more charge we've got, and the better the information flows, the better we're going to function. So it's just a bit like our computer, that when it's all brand new, before we update Windows or anything, or update the software on the iPhone, it runs really quickly. The body's just the same. It just wants enough charge, as in enough electrons, and it wants all of the information that our bodies need to process at a cellular level to run as smoothly as possible. Because I think every second in one human body performs something like 10 to the 23 reactions. So that's something like a sextillion number of reactions in 1 second. So that's how the idea of looking at our bodies, not just as like a lump of meat, which we're not, but also looking at it as a more sort of like a quantum computer that's biological, which is actually what we are. It can be easier to sort of understand these ideas of energy and information and bad information. Because I was talking before about doing exercise with bad form. So you're just feeding the joints and everything, it's bad information, so you'll get a bad movement out. So back to the genetically modified potatoes, even if the genes or whatever have been, I used to do sort of genetic stuff I worked on moss and things like that. So there's all sorts I could say, but what the problem with genetically modifying things is, all of a sudden you've made a brand new food. And like I said earlier, biology hates being surprised. A lot of our physiology and the way our brain works, it always wants to be able to anticipate the future. So if you suddenly create a crazy sort of potato and then feed it to your mitochondria, it's like eating the banana at Christmas time in the UK. It's completely confusing. Whereas people who over the years have bred the carrot that was originally purple to being orange, it happened really, really, really slowly. So we kind of got used to it. And also people then didn't have the capacity to take genes out of different organisms or put promoters in, which is something that sort of makes a gene get expressed more quickly. They just had to do it naturally. So we have been fiddling about with genetics, and obviously genetics changes itself over the years as well. So it's that kind of idea of, even though it sounds like a really good idea at the time to make a potato that doesn't go brown, or a flavor saver tomato that doesn't go off. I think there was also the golden rice that had extra vitamin A in it. I sometimes don't know. Did somebody genuinely try to be helpful to us, but then sort of what's that phrase? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And it's also, I think, because if you just look at everything through a biology lens, you can miss out on all of the quantum physics and information side. So you're basically doing things and affecting our system, which is like a giant quantum computer that people don't fully understand, by accident. But then I also would imagine there's financial interest, especially with Monsanto and Roundup, or glyphosate and the Roundup Ready soybean. So it's all about making things that our body's not used to. Same as with light, that our biology is evolved in sunlight, so it expects to see just the visible light and the near infrared and the ultraviolet. But now we've added in all kinds of other lights, like artificial fluorescent lights, screen lights, then things like 5G, Wi-Fi, radio waves. They're all on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's just light we can't see. So we've added in all of these things which our body isn't used to, and our body uses light to be able to tell the time, because we wouldn't want dusk or nighttime to come upon us as a surprise. Your body needs to get ready for that. And then the same as getting up in the morning, the light signals sort of start the day so that the body can get ready and make what it needs, not have a sudden surprise. So this again, when I talk to people about this on a sort of more simple daily life level, lots of people get anxious because they don't know what might happen next. So on another level, sometimes confusing your body massively from, say, not going outside enough and grounding, or eating weird food, or staying up all night with weird light, you're going to get anxious. You don't know what's going to happen. It's all confused. So for some people, sort of anxiety and mood problems come out when you confuse the body, by giving it things that it's not expecting, because we didn't evolve with those foods, or we didn't evolve with that kind of lighting.
You said right at the beginning that the artificial lights and our lifestyle at the moment is increasing our glucose just naturally. So as people, we are producing, we've got more glucose flowing around in our bloodstreams, and therefore more insulin in our bloodstreams than our ancestors did, who didn't have any exposure to these things, which I find absolutely fascinating. So, I mean, this makes sense. So when you say you're a circadian ketogenic coach, it's kind of coming together now. So would the keto diet, from what I understand, is really, really good, and it's been scientifically proven to help with schizophrenia and mental health issues. But would you say that now you would recommend it for most of us because of what we're talking about? Because mostly we've got a lot of insulin in general, and so we all need to lower it. We all need to avoid carbohydrates and processed sugars and things like that. We all need to do that because generally, as a population, we're more likely to have high blood sugar.
Oh yeah, definitely. But also back to the blue light and the health. There's sort of thousands of studies now on circadian rhythms and night shifts, and ALAN, it's called, artificial light at night, and it's linked to sort of depression, cancer, anxiety, diabetes, obesity. And people have tested. I actually interviewed Dr. Martin Moore-Eid yesterday, and he's been studying circadian biology for about 40 years, so he could list off many, many studies. And he's even done studies on night shifts, and people just simply eat more. And it's like the contrast between smoking and not smoking. The data is just so obvious that the error bars are small, and it's very clear that if you sit in blue light all the time, you're going to eat more. And people get more insulin resistant, so they regulate their blood sugar in a sort of worse fashion. So yeah, there's the other thing. I just wanted to go back to the
Yeah, go
circadian
on.
eating for a moment, because I don't want to say to people you have to do something all the time, because there's that key thing about the abundance in summer. So there's lots of natural light, lots of sunlight, so that's going to offset, because natural sunlight and the UV light and the near infrared actually controls blood sugar, and so does the natural blue light from the sun. So that means people would have the biological capacity to eat the fruit that was there. And because I work a lot with people and look at hormones and things all the time, sometimes if people try to do a sort of very serious keto or carnivore diet in very hot weather, it's just so incompatible with the environment. They can get weird thyroid and sex hormones. So sometimes having, introducing, I would call it a cyclical carbohydrates eating, or just including some fresh fruit and vegetables, can be really helpful for hormones. But that's all about, also you should always test yourselves as well, get labs, have a glucose and ketone measurer, because that's the other important thing. We all live in different environments, so it's impossible to say, oh, this is going to make your blood sugar go down, because you have to measure it yourself, because there's all sorts of things that make blood sugar go up, not just food. So yeah, that's that. But I would say that, to add on to what you said, there's actually loads of studies on many, many other illnesses and situations with keto. So there's things like migraines, type 2 diabetes, bipolar, epilepsy, because those studies started over 100 years ago. There's lots of data on cancer, neurodegeneration, and things like that. So it has a lot of benefits, but there's also other reasons separate to insulin and blood sugar that keto diets can be helpful, because they do automatically exclude processed food that's got your seed oils and your fructose corn syrup in it and the bad information. And then to add to all of that, in lots of processed food, especially like grains as well, iron has been added, but it's chemical iron. There's about 9 forms of this iron that gets added, and they've all been shown to be carcinogenic. And the FDA's got the RDA wrong as well. It's meant to be 1 milligram of iron, and they think it's 2. So there's also this getting all this extra iron that we don't need in a really terrible form from processed food. So that's one reason why the ketogenic or even paleo or low carb will work, because it's not necessarily what you eat. Sometimes it's what you don't eat. So that's sort of the very first layer, because a lot of people go to whole food or paleo or low carb and then they go into keto, whereas the official definition of being in ketosis would be ketones of a minimum of 0.5 millimolar. And then you can make the diet more ketogenic depending on what condition you want to treat. And the more serious the condition, the more ketones they're going to need. And there are some people that do need to stay in a ketogenic diet all the time, like epilepsy, just because the consequence of coming out would be disastrous. Whereas for other people, sometimes it's better to do what our ancestors would have done, which would have been eat the produce and the nuts and the fruit and everything outside that's growing, and then it goes away again by the end of the autumn, and then people would go without it until it came back again in the sort of later summer.
So just say somebody wanted to lose weight, be in shape, feel good, and they're interested in the keto diet. So what level would you recommend in millimoles for someone who's aiming for that?
Oh, probably something, you'd have to have a minimum of 0.5, but then also, something like about 1 millimolar. But people make ketones at different rates, because younger people and children make them more. But also, again, it depends on their circadian rhythm, because there's a hormone called leptin that's driven by light. And it also is an energy accountant. So it measures how much energy you've got on board in the form of electrons, and how charged those electrons are by light. And then if you've got sort of a circadian rhythm completely all over the place, because you always lie in and you just look at your phone as soon as you get up and sit in blue light all day, that's going to drastically affect your energy status. So your leptin levels, or you can develop something called leptin resistance, and that's when people sort of have raised appetite, because on a biophysical level, they don't have enough energy. So the body just asks for more and more food electrons, and then it's going to store the energy. So it's almost like when people are leptin resistant, their bodies are blind to their own body fat, because leptin in the body can't actually see the fat. It can just sense this person's in an energy deficient state on a sort of electronic and physics level. Therefore, we need to eat as much food as possible, and any food we eat, we must store. So that's why I would always check that as well, and work on people's circadian rhythms as well as doing a keto diet, because there are so many studies linking horrible lighting and blue light to obesity. I just think it would make the whole losing weight process a lot easier, because everything's all about making things as simple as possible. So if you fix your light environment first, then transitioning into a keto diet would be really easy, because you've got the groundwork in your physiology, and you're much less likely to sort of suffer sort of carb cravings, or or whatever else people want to say about the keto diet. So just on another sort of level, like I said before, I don't think carbohydrates are bad in the right context, in the right environment. So for a lot of people, when I see lots of food diaries, so you can always see the breads and the food that contains hardly any nutrients and poor information. That's a lot of the things that get taken out for keto. So there's not very much sort of information in pasta or sort of rice cakes and other things that people eat. So you're removing the bad food. And then what you're left with is sort of things like fat and protein, and we need those. And the other important thing about fat is it's low in something called deuterium. So that's an isotope of hydrogen. And a lot of people haven't heard about it, but it's really, really important, because even though it's not very abundant, if in our mitochondria some deuterium get in instead of a hydrogen, because I said earlier that in the mitochondria we have the protons or the hydrogen go in to power the motor that makes the ATP, and then the electrons go in to be the electric current, and then the whole thing makes metabolic deuterium depleted water as well to power our water battery. If a deuterium gets into the mitochondria, it's like an adult trying to go down a child's slide, and it breaks it. So you can end up with mitochondrial damage and dysfunction, and pretty much 85% of chronic disease are damaged mitochondria. And even on a very simplistic level, for people who are sort of new to all this, it's like having a really bad battery in your iPhone that keeps going flat. That's what it's like to have bad mitochondria. And also, you can also make the analogy of mitochondria being like classic cars. They use a lot of they make a lot of inflammation and say exhaust like a car would for not a lot of energy output. So then you've got your things like pain and inflammation and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and then depression, which some people, it's just I'm so tired, I just have to go to bed. And when you seriously mess up mitochondria, this is again very well documented, they're at the root of cancer as well. So there's lots of different ways in which a keto diet's beneficial. So first of all, we said it excludes food with horrible information and seed oils and sugar and rubbish. Then I went to the next level and said it also gets rid of food with bad information. Then, like you said, because it's low carbohydrate, we're not constantly raising the blood sugar and raising insulin and making sort of blood sugar and cortisol spikes throughout the day. And then on the next level, the ketogenic diet is going to be low in deuterium. So we don't have this heavy hydrogen trying to get into the body, because it goes in other places in the body as well. And because it's not quite the same as a hydrogen, it provides different energy and information. It just basically is a burden, because it can attach to hormones and cholesterol. And then when the body wants to chop the cholesterol up to make vitamin D or sex hormones, if there's a deuterium there, it might not quite recognize it, because it's like a hydrogen, but not quite. So there's that level of a problem as well. And finally, and I think sort of really importantly for a ketogenic diet, it makes more water in the mitochondria, because fat has got more electrons than glucose. And as I was saying before, the amount of water that the mitochondria make is fundamentally crucial for how we function, because we are sort of 65 to 70% water. So it has to be really important, because otherwise, why is it 3/4 of us? So on a diet when people are in ketosis, it would make, say, one equivalent of water for every, say, molecule of fat that went in. But then if people eat carbs, it only makes half the amount of water, and protein somewhere in between at 0.75. But generally, the amount of protein that people eat has kind of stayed fairly constant. If you look at sort of graphs over the years, it's just the carbs and the fat that change. So from how much electrons can I get and how much water can I get out of my mitochondria, the fat is a much better fuel. And also it's a less inflammatory fuel as well, because the way in which the electrons from the fat go through the mitochondria is not the same as glucose. So it doesn't produce as many of the bad free radicals. because we need free radicals for signaling in the body and body defenses, because they're sort of like a magnetic molecule, but too many of them at the wrong time in the wrong place is not a good idea as well. So that's why on sort of different levels, doing a ketogenic diet has got lots of benefits that you can't really dispute at a sort of biophysics level, because we've known about deuterium ever since Oppenheimer wanted to make atomic bombs, because it's part of the bomb making process. And then it's just like you said, there's lots of science that's sort of somewhat suppressed. But it's like everything. Once you know about something and you wake up, you can't go back to sleep again. But it kind of helps you to sort of orientate and make food choices. And you can test deuterium in yourself and your water and your food as well. And also, we can always come back to deuterium, because it's not just about food. We deplete it. We get rid of it ourselves by doing things like sweating, which you mentioned, exercise. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, because we've evolved with fruit, which is high in deuterium and things, there's times of year, like in the summer, where it's hot, people would be outside more, they'd be sweating more, they would deplete their deuterium and it wouldn't be a problem. It's again, if people are eating mangoes and bananas in the middle of winter, that's a very high deuterium food, and there isn't the sunlight to be able to deplete it how we would naturally. So again, it all depends on the context. So I'm not saying that people have to be keto all the time, but then it's always, some people just really like something, it works for them, so they just do it for the rest of their lives. But
Mm.
I've just found sometimes with me and other people that it's fine for ages, and all of a sudden it stops working. And that's when reintroducing the fruit or the vegetables can be helpful, because like I said earlier, there's something called a superoxide surge that happens in the mitochondria, and you want those to happen every now and again. And when people eat carbs, it'll change the way the electrons go through the mitochondria and create that surge. So it's not a bad thing to introduce carbs, just as long as they're sort of appropriate. I don't mean sort of eating ice cream or sort of cake binges, because that would shock the system, because it got used to keto and all of a sudden you put like 5 McFlurries in. It didn't expect that. So again, people get inflamed the next
Yeah.
day if they do stuff like that. So it's sort of the same thing. Your body gets used to things, and then you know, you shouldn't just shock it with a totally different food. But then from an ancestral point of view, a ketogenic diet would make sense. And people always ask me about bread and say, oh, well, you know, what about, but the bread that Jesus ate would be a totally different bread to, you know, a McDonald's bun or whatever. And
Exactly.
because we didn't have all these other stressors like glyphosate and Wi-Fi and pollution and blue light and all of this, the body was much more sort of, it was much more able to tolerate sort of foods like that. And also a lot of food, especially in America, has been over glutenized, because a lot of Americans say that when they come to Europe, even though they're gluten intolerant in the US, they are able
Feel
to eat the
better.
food because it's like better information. It's the same with dairy in the US. So I'm not being horrible about the US. I lived there for a while and I'm going back again, but I definitely wouldn't eat the bread there or the milk. And when Americans go and eat sort of raw cheese and stuff in places like Switzerland or Austria and eat their bread, they find that they don't have these reactions because they're just less messed about with.
Right. So would you recommend then what I gather from what you said? First of all, incredible. I feel like I've never come across someone who describes the reasons to go on to try out a keto diet than
Mhm.
what you've just gone through. So you go through it in a whole different level that I've heard. So that is just brilliant. But from what I gather, you would recommend that it's good to cycle in and out of keto. Like you don't need to be on it constantly. It's good to every now and again introduce some carbs, come out of ketosis, and then go back in. Is there a
Yeah,
set
definitely.
amount of time, or again, is it just
No,
unique to each individual?
yeah, it's one of these things. Generally, with people, it's always much better if they've never done keto or carnivore before, because the carnivores are relative.
Mm.
Personally, I don't do carnivore all the time. So some people are very avidly, and I respect that. But it's something that it's very simple, carnivore and keto. Just don't eat plants, and then they can't eat any carbs. And then with keto, people can get a bit, oh no, I've got to measure this and weigh that, and it appears more faffy than it is.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, for somebody who's never been in ketosis before, it's much better to just go in it and stay in it, because a lot of people will lose weight, and same with fasting. The newbie gains, as they'd call it in the
Mm,
gym, we can say the newbie losses. So it's much better to actually get fat adapted, but ultimately we want something called metabolic flexibility,
right.
because we don't want our biology to just freak out every time we ate something that was sweet, because our ancestors would have now and again found honey or berries or made bread or whatever. So we have evolved with carbs, regardless of what people want to say. However, it back to your question of, say, if somebody wanted to lose weight and they're all ready to do their keto, I wouldn't start cycling until they're very well into it. Give it at least 3 months.
At least three
Or
months.
yeah, or more, because the thing is, with lots of people, you have to try something, you have to do it properly, and you have to accept it might be bumpy in the beginning because you've changed everything and your body doesn't like surprises, and biology
Mm,
can be a bit slow. It's got to sort of make all of the enzymes to break down the ketones and then use the ketones, and it just takes a little bit of time. So you want to really give it a good chance, because some people who are sort of semi-fat adapted, if they've exercised a lot or fasted a lot, and then some people think, they'll tell me, oh no, I'm not addicted to carbs. No, no, no. Then they'll do a keto and say, oh yeah, I was actually,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
And it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, we all get addicted to things all the time. It's completely normal, but it's about acknowledging that you are, and then fine, they can move on from that. But fundamentally, you still want to be able to have metabolic flexibility, so that, like I was saying, summer and sort of early autumn are times of abundance. So your body's expecting you to eat that fruit that's out there, because it can sense it, it can see it, it can smell it, it knows it's there. And it wouldn't be wrong to not eat some of it, just because that sort of evolutionarily, that's what we would have done. Not to gorge on it, but then to be, okay, right, the season's finished, no more fruit now until
mm,
next August. So it makes things easier if you're more in line with nature and the planets and the cosmos, because like I was saying, we always want to stack things in our favor, and losing weight, even though it's very simple, just eat less, it's actually really difficult, because people get cravings, and people, relatives tempt them, or all sorts of things. And because our appetite and hormones are so tied to light, if people can fix their light environment, it's just going to make everything a lot easier. And UV light from the sun is really important for making dopamine and serotonin, and an appetite suppressing peptide called alpha MSH, which also makes melanin, our suntan. That's a whole other podcast of what melanin does. So it just makes everything a lot easier if people are getting energy from the sun, because we don't just get energy from food. We are a solar panel. And then also grounding is really important, because that's a way to draw in electrons from the earth. So even if people think it's complete wackadoodlery, there are plenty of studies on grounding. They can look it up for themselves. And also, if we were meant to sort of be isolated from the earth, we'd be born with wellies on or shoes. So we've got
right.
bare feet and hands for a reason, and our hands and feet are sweaty for a reason, because when they're a bit damp, it's much easier to ground. And
Wow, did not know that. That is,
and also, people think grounding's just standing on the grass barefoot, but just
yeah,
touching
that's what I thought.
plants. Yeah, touching plants that are grounded, you'll get grounded through them. If your animal's grounded and you touch, say, the ears or stroke them, you can ground through them. Sitting on a concrete bench, walking on the beach, or swimming in the sea and or outdoor lakes, that's the ultimate grounding experience. But again, you're not just getting electrons from the earth, you're actually getting information as well. There's things like the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the earth. So it's just
Mm,
all about, the more in sync we are with nature, the more settled our biology is. So the easier it's going to be to change ways of eating and adopt a weight loss plan, because
yeah,
I've just found a lot of the time with people, and you probably have heard the same, that everything was going fine, but then their headspace got derailed.
yeah,
So
all the
if
time.
you can keep yourself in sync with the planets and nature, because they're always going to be doing things, and if you're in line with their dance and the sun's dance and stuff like that, then it makes it much easier to do the food thing. And the other thing that I always go on about is people being stuck in the base chakra, where they just obsess about food, and it's like, well, that's not going to work either.
Yeah,
You've got to think about food and energy and everything in a totally different way. And then there's lots of this sort of deprivation mindset of, you know, people, oh no, but I'll be hungry and I'm not getting enough food. And it's like, well, actually, only sort of 30% of it comes from your food anyway. There's all of this energy that you can get from the ambient environment. So it's just about changing mindset as well. And obviously, sleep is really important for weight loss as well, and keto, because when you change something, and people like to use carbs to help them go to sleep because it is part of sort of blue light toxicity, but it's also, they can be calming and people get used to it. That if people sort out their light biology, like blocking the blue light after sunset, don't have screens on sort of before bed, and don't go shopping in the supermarket at 8 or 9 p.m. when the super bright lights, because your brain will think it's daytime again.
Right.
So if people sleep badly, that messes up fat loss, because that's actually when we go into ketosis, and then that's when we actually lose the fat, because we breathe fat or weight out as carbon dioxide. That's the actual mass, and it happens, you know, the sleeping phase is, that's when it happens. People think it's happening when they're actually working out, but it doesn't work like that. So sleep is actually really vital for weight loss, because it affects mood and cravings, but also from a biological level, that if people sleep well, it's just going to be easier. And when people change their ways of eating or want to eat less calories, say friends of mine who are bodybuilders or people that want to do a 7-day fast, they'll always say that the sleeping can get them, because if people are really depriving themselves, your brain is like, no, why are you sleeping? You
Right, it's
must be
hard to
out
sleep.
hunting and looking for
Mm.
berries. So if you can satisfy your body's energy needs by other means, such as the light and the grounding, and then we probably won't have time to go into water, then it's more happy. There's enough energy on board, so it doesn't get so massively stressed out if you eat less. And sometimes people just find they're just not hungry, even on keto as well, because that sort of regulates their blood sugar and their insulin. So they just eat less without even thinking about it. And that's the best way of all, because it's almost like the weight went away by itself and you didn't have to try. That's the ideal situation that people are looking for.
Mm. I saw this post that you made when I was looking through your Instagram, and you made this post that basically said you only get something like 30% of your energy from food.
Mm.
Something like that, 30%. And I was like, oh my God, I've never thought of it that way before. So when you just said, if someone is struggling with the keto diet, if they're struggling with deprivation, low calorie, and feeling like they're missing out on things, and, you know, if they're feeling anxious and they're feeling a low mood because they've changed their diet, it's not just about that. Like, look at your environment and look at your behavior and your light and what you're exposing yourself to and the grounding. And that provides the rest of the energy that you need to be happy and to, you know, feel full of energy and to feel like you can get through this ketogenic diet.
Oh
I've
yes, yeah,
never thought of
exactly.
it that way before. That's incredible. I'm really
But
excited about this light situation, by the way, because I don't do
yeah.
any of the blue light blocking at the moment. I don't do any of that stuff yet, but I'm very, very interested.
So the good thing about quantum biology is it's mostly free. Yes, we can go into giant rabbit holes of things you can
Mm.
buy, but the sun's free, and so is grounding, and so is swimming in the sea. And blue blockers are not very expensive, but also it's very damaging for the retina to have just blue light shone in it, because retinol or vitamin A absorbs in the blue, and we don't want to damage that, because it'll wreak havoc in the eye and wreak havoc in the rest of the body. So there's lots of benefits, not just the whole light thing. And also the thing about the blue light is it's not very good for skin, because with teenagers, obviously they just laugh their head off at me, but because they get acne,
Mm.
screens and iPad use and too much telly and living on the laptop makes the acne worse. So they will actually pretend that oh yeah, I've started to do something different now and I'm not on my computer as much. It wasn't because of what you said. I'm going to play football instead. And then I have noticed over time that, because that's sometimes you've got to leverage people to do stuff, because people also, even that the body doesn't like surprises, it likes novelty, but it likes everything to stay the same as well. So people have to have a reason to want to do things. And obviously weight loss is usually a really popular one. And then skin problems is another reason that people switch to keto. Polycystic ovaries and things like that, keto can be really helpful, because that's basically sort of an insulin driven thing. And then of course there's people that want to get pregnant, because if you're insulin resistant, it really messes up sex hormones, but then
Mm.
too much deuterium massively messes up sex hormones as well. And I think the important thing, you alluded to it earlier, is I'd always say, don't worry, it's not going to be a keto prison, because the more people learn about light, and they get really into it, they realize it gives them more wiggle room. And also, some people move to somewhere hotter. So sometimes people move to somewhere with much more sun and much more energy and much more beaches and much more grounding. And they find that they can have, more wiggle room with their keto, because sometimes if you tell somebody something, oh, you can't ever have carbs again, the monkey mind, the subconscious will go, oh, and that's not happening. I'm going to make you eat a cake tomorrow. Ha 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 ha. So sometimes it's about having this idea, okay, I'm just doing an experiment, and I'm going to get fat adapted, but I'm not constrained to this way of eating forever. And then some people just really like it and just stay in it all by themselves. But like I did say, especially for women, and especially sort of more nearer the perimenopause, sometimes a bit of carb cycling can be really helpful just for hormones. But people would know straight away, and it happens with men as well. Sometimes the thyroid gets a bit low, or the sex hormones are a bit off, and then they'll have a day, or they'll go away abroad and eat the food that was there, and a lot of it was, say, fruit, and it's sunnier, and they come back and say, oh yeah, no, I felt much better with the fruit. I couldn't have eaten keto in Mexico.
Mm.
um
So, can I ask then, because this is a very popular question, and even I feel it sometimes, being in ketosis, is it a safe state to be in, especially if you're a woman? Let's say you're in you'll just say you want to get pregnant, or you're in the childbirthing phase of your life. So your hormones are really delicate at that time.
but if we think about our ancestors, they would have had to have babies in times of
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes
scarcity.
sense.
And also, just as a sort of medical disclaimer, for people in keto, loads of people do keto pregnancies and keto breastfeeding, but it's usually, don't do keto first and then be keto in pregnancy. And then you have to
Mhm.
be a bit careful with breastfeeding and keto, just because you're making milk, so people can go a bit too ketotic by accident, but it's not common. So that's what I would say is the only
Yeah.
sort of risk, because all you're doing is you're just using a different fuel. You're just using fat instead of glucose, and the body can make all the glucose it needs anyway. So if it wanted glucose for whatever, it would just make it. But
Right.
yeah, if you tell me your story, so
Well, I
yeah.
mean, is there a risk of going too low calorie and doing too much keto and too much fasting? Because I took 2 years to conceive my second child, and one of my instincts is that I was taking the fasting and the keto maybe a little bit too far at that time. I got quite slim, and I just didn't feel hungry though. Like, as with keto and, fasting, you kind of lose your appetite, which is a really nice thing because obviously you stop the craving. But is there a danger for women in that sense, like just to go too far with it? Do you find that with your clients
Oh yeah,
or?
definitely, all the time, because that's when we know we can have leptin resistance, when people have got lots of body fat and the body makes more and more and more leptin, so the level gets higher and higher and higher, like insulin resistance, but then it ignores the signal. It
Mm,
goes the other way, that if people are sort of energy deficit, so they're getting up in the morning, drinking a coffee, doing CrossFit,
mm,
and then eating at like 4 p.m., that's like a really
exactly.
good way to create a leptin problem as well. But you'll go the
Right.
other way, so you'll have low leptin. So that's just signaling there's an energy deficit, because there is. So, and your body will
Yes.
panic, and then it'll shut down. We've got, like I was saying, the cells do whatever it was, is 10 to the 23 billion processes per second. Whereas if we don't have enough energy, it's going to start shutting down these processes, and it has a hierarchy of what's important. So it'll shut down progesterone, for example, it'll shut that down before estrogen, and then usually testosterone for women as well. And the estrogen gets shut down last, because
Yes.
it's just different.
So your hormones
And
just go
obviously,
flat, right? Yeah.
yeah, yes, it will do, because also leptin controls fertility and menstrual cycles. So it's about biology sensing, does this woman have enough energy on board to be able to carry
Mm,
a baby? And if it senses no, then, well, she's not getting pregnant. And that's just
yeah.
how biology is. It's not risking a half pregnancy if the woman's energy status is low. So it'll think, right, okay, we won't make any hormones then, and we'll have no periods and no ovulations, and the egg factory can go on sort of quiet for a bit. But also on the other level, if we don't make cortisol, then we die because we need that. So when people start doing things like that, over fasting, which can raise cortisol, um, not eating breakfast, which is going to mess up the timing of the body, getting up and going and exercising in a blue lit gym instead of going, doing it outside, that's all going to raise cortisol. And then your body will do something called the pregnenolone steal and just shuttle all of your master sex hormone away from the ones you want, like DHEA and testosterone and progesterone, and just make
Mm.
cortisol. So then people get that wired feeling and mood swings and wired and tired and not being able to sleep. And absolutely all the time people do stuff like that.
Right. It's
So
it's all I see, especially in the fitness industry, because that's where I come from. That's my background. And I
yeah.
see stories of that all the time when
Mm,
women just take it too far, like exercise too much, do too much keto, too much fasting, just always trying to take it to the next level. And you can feel amazing. Because I remember I felt really good. And I was like, God, I can't be unwell. Like, I can't understand why I'm not getting pregnant. Like, I just feel so amazing. Like, my energy was really good. But then obviously, my hormones were telling a different story.
mm.
So for you, because obviously you've been doing this for a long time, how do you ensure that you're getting enough calories and you're getting enough food? Because with when I was talking to Phil Escott, who was a fabulous guest, he said that, being on carnivore, he barely even thinks to eat. So I was speaking to him about 4 o'clock UK time, and he said, "Oh, I haven't even eaten yet. I haven't even thought about it." So for women, obviously, what we've just been discussing, that's probably not the best thing. So how do you make sure you're getting enough food when you lose your appetite so much?
Okay, yeah, because that's really important because I was saying that food's a Zeitgeber or a timekeeper. So ideally for leptin sensitivity and cortisol management, if people want to fast, it's better to just eat breakfast and then they could always just, if they are in that way of doing things, just not eat through the rest of the day. But eating breakfast is really an important part of setting the circadian rhythm. But also I think it just depends on the person because
Mm.
um I'm sort of more no, I'm just going to say that I have my routine, and because I've eaten breakfast and seen the sunrise that many times, my biology expects it. So therefore, it makes me hungry for the breakfast. Whereas right now, I could easily just not have anything now because if I'm going to miss meals, it's like in the evening. Although I have
Really?
got sort of other
Mm.
ideas about missing lunch in hot countries would actually make more sense for people if they wanted to match it with the sun. So I think it's like it, it's it's one of those things that your body will probably let you know, but then it's back to sort of ensuring that it's adequate nutrition. Because the other thing that I'm really into is things like making sure people get enough vitamin A and copper and minerals and DHA, which comes from seafood. Because when people are well nourished, they're obviously, say, with minerals and things, are not going to be seeking food all the time. So I think it's just an organization thing. And I always pick food based on how nutritious it is. I can't say I like liver, and I occasionally cook things, but I try not to because it's sort of, that's just my view. And I don't mind if people sit in both camps for this. So sometimes people are not hungry just because they don't need it, because it does come down to we've all got plenty of, body fat. Even a ripped bodybuilder's got sort of like 10,000 calories of fat. So it's all about making sure you've got the nutrients, especially the hard to get things like DHA and so I suppose like lots of nutrients are hard to get. But then it's just about being organized. But I would always say, as long as people are eating breakfast, that's the
Right.
most important thing. And I think it's just about, not forcing yourself to eat, but making sure that you're nourishing your body as well. Because when we talk about energy and stuff, there's just so many other levels that this could go to about what we really are as a human. So that's what you were saying, that you ate less and you had tons and tons of energy. And we won't go down this now, but there are people like that, but they're the minority. That the majority's often looking for food, and, oh, when's my next meal coming, and, oh, what am I going to have for dinner? So I would say, just for people who just forget to eat, maybe their body doesn't want it, but it depends if they're doing stuff on purpose, like, oh, I'm going to do a fast, I'm going to go to the gym for 3 hours. So Yeah, it's just like an organization thing. Ensuring that you've ticked all of the nutrition boxes can be a way to make sure that people get enough nutrients. Say if somebody lives on the beach all day and is grounding all day, because I do know breatharians and they sometimes do some juicing, but they do actually really not eat a lot and they're perfectly happy because they just sort of live
They get their
outside.
energy from the like the environment, which I've just learned from you. Which that's probably my favorite thing from this conversation, just knowing that the energy doesn't just come from the food. And obviously we know energy comes from the sun. We know that, but the way it's been described is really sunk in today, which I'm really, really happy
Yeah,
about.
but also it's not woo central because Nikola Tesla also took it to a whole other level that you can actually get energy to power devices out of the environment. But of course, all his work got taken, and because it would have been a threat to the oil and the gas and the energy companies. So it's all about what I was saying before. There's different mindsets, and people often live in a scarcity mindset, whereas the abundance mindset of energy is beyond food. And there's a lot more we could say about that, but just this idea of gathering energy from the ambient environment, when people go and investigate it for themselves, that they'll just find it that's how it is. And if they don't want to believe that, there are so many studies of people under blue light all day eating more. So, and then the opposite to that study would be being outside in natural light, and the people eat less. So it's kind of just quite natural process.
So can we just go through just the best ways to gather energy from the environment? Like we've probably covered them all already, but grounding is one.
Yeah, but barefoot, and then there's going to be going out in the sun, but with as less clothes on as possible, to get the signal all over your body, because our skin's a solar panel. The eyes can do some of the hormonal pathways, and then manage your blue light and tech use, because that steals your water. And then, as I was saying before, our body is a sort of a hydrated semiconductor. This is not my invention. People like Albert St. Georgi and lots of other scientists have been talking about this for nearly 100 years. So it would be about making sure you've gotten the maximum amount of exclusion zone or fourth phase water, or just water in your body. And then making sure you get sunlight to act as the solar panel, because it charges up your water battery, and then you'll function better. And nobody refutes that not having
Yeah,
enough waters, but they just
yeah,
think water is drinking 8 glasses of tap water a day, or
right.
8 bottles of Volvic out of a plastic bottle, and that's not what I'm referring to.
So when it comes to blue light exposure, when is it okay to expose yourself? Because I'm on my laptop, let's say it's 9 o'clock in the morning, you're on yours, it's 4 o'clock where you are.
Yeah,
So,
so I've got flux. I've got a red. I've got a tint on my screen, so there's
oh,
less blue coming out. And I
okay.
normally wear
Is that a
blue
setting on the
blockers.
laptop?
Well, no, it's just some software. And
Oh,
also I've got my window open behind me to let the natural light in. And then I've got a UV light here, and I've got an incandescent light
mm.
here. So I'm actually making an environment that's got as much natural light as
So are
possible. And
you
then
blocking blue light as much as you can all day? Is
well,
that the goal?
I don't turn my light bulbs on, and when the things I've got a bulb in, I always use an incandescent. So it's the LEDs and the fluorescent lights that emit the obnoxious. Because people get confused when I say blue, but what it is just a trick of the eye, because the light looks white, but a lot of wavelengths have been stripped out, so they've got a huge amount of blue light. So that's what the problem is, because it's not what your body's expecting. It's only some of the spectrum. And then screens and iPads and things, they all emit blue, but you can go into accessibility, and then
Yeah,
text, and then color filters, and make it red.
yeah.
Or you can take it outside and use it, because then it's diluted by all of the ambient light. And then
Mm.
people can wear blue blockers. Like in the daytime, say if I had to work at a computer that wasn't mine, I would use orange blue blockers, because I wouldn't want to fiddle with someone else's computer. And then things like TV in the evening after sunset, that's a ton of blue light that would really confuse your body. Or people sleeping with the lights on, that's even worse. Or having
Yeah.
tech in the bedroom, and lights and things on in there, that's going to create light when your body is expecting and needs darkness for
Mm.
sleeping.
And what about in, let's say, in the UK when it's dark, it's dismal a lot of the time, and you say we need sunlight on our eyes and our body, our skin. What's your solution?
I have to go somewhere else because I've just come back from Switzerland because
Right.
it's nice and high up with hardly, in the mountains. So there's lots of UV there. Or you just have to go out more and sort of wear less clothes. But unfortunately, it just resorts to having to leave. But then a lot of people, Brits are the biggest holiday makers or
Mm.
takers of all nations. So it's something that we just do it naturally. Somehow we just know we need to get out.
Yeah, that's
Or some
true.
people move. So, and it's a problem. The whole thing about sunbeds is that's a whole other topic, but you're taking ultraviolet light away from the rest of the natural sunlight. But there are beds now where there's red in them and stuff like that. And for people who've got depression or really missing the sun, that can be something that they can use because obviously the alternative, like depression's horrific. And if somebody can go on a sunbed for 10 minutes and feel $1 million, then so what? And you can make them safer by making sure that you go outside after taking a red light with you. But fundamentally, that's sort of the information you get from a sunbed isn't the same or as good as the sun. So unfortunately, with these bad weather places, it's either move or go or leave them for a bit.
But that makes me think, what about back in the day, like our ancestors? How did they cope? Because the people who were living back in the day in the UK, they couldn't move. So what were they doing in the winter?
Oh, yeah, because this is another topic we haven't gone into yet,
Oh.
cold therapy or cold
Oh,
thermogenesis. Because
yes.
if you
Yeah.
if you do CT or cold thermogenesis, it makes your body produce ultraviolet light inside. So it's the low strength biophotons. So that's what I do in the winter. Like, because I swim in a lake, most mornings, and with cold thermogenesis you make your own ultraviolet light from the inside, so it's just a different process.
Bloody
So
hell.
that's how we got around it, because this is now leading into coupled and uncoupled mitochondria.
Yeah,
That-
this is
that's
like going down
the thing
another
is,
subject
yeah,
completely.
people who migrated away from the equator, their mitochondria changed so that they could uncouple and make heat. Whereas people who are equatorial, their mitochondria can't do that, and they could freeze to death. So it's an adaptation that a lot of people have. So doing cold thermogenesis or CT or cold therapy or whatever, cold plunges or lake swimming, there's plenty of that in the UK. And then it would be things like not using the heating as much, less using the cold to make your own ultraviolet. And then people would have to sort of ground more. And also there are other, I'm sure Britain wasn't as cloudy back whenever for our ancestors it is now,
Right.
with people sort of fiddling about with stuff, doing
Yeah.
things. So, we don't, I'd have to look at all the meteorological reports of the UK over the last 300 years if somebody documented them to see what it was like. But yeah, you just use the cold, because like the people in Iceland and Scandinavia, they embrace the cold and they
Yes, they
use
do.
saunas and things like that. Whereas, and they're perfectly healthy, but then they started sort of introducing too much artificial blue light and seed oils and stuff. But they were really healthy until they started to add those things in, because they embraced the cold and used saunas and things like that. They had to walk outside in the snow. Also, snow reflects UV light
Mm.
off it as well. So no matter what, there's something Mother Nature's offered. Because yeah, you're completely right. We'd all have died out in the northern hemisphere away from the equator if that was the case. So there's obviously other mechanisms to make
So,
UV light.
so you're saying if you live in a cold, dark country, you should be more encouraged to do cold therapy. Whereas if you're in a hot
Yes.
country like where I am, it's just it's not as needed as
Yes,
for
yeah, and
some.
also the
That's
people
so
who
interesting.
yeah, so people who say in Africa that they're designed biochemically to withstand very high UV, so they've got loads of melanin, because
Mm.
otherwise it would be a disaster. But they're not designed for doing cold, because they're much more likely to get crushed by an elephant. And so they need to be able to run away than they are to freeze to death. Whereas if you live
Right.
in sort of like the very top of Scotland or Lapland or something, he could freeze to death. So that's the biggest risk. So the whole thing with the cold is it was something we had to adapt to, and then there's obviously less light, so there's naturally less melanin in, say, the skin of people in Finland than there would be in somebody in Mexico, but just because the skin's paler, so it can grab every last photon of light to make vitamin D and get all of the signals from the light. So that's what it's all about. It's like you can get the outside sunlight, but then you can make your own as well. And obviously, cold thermogenesis is really good for weight loss because
Mm.
when you make the fat cells cold, they're much more likely to spill their contents, and then it's really good for insulin and leptin resistance. And obviously, you get really cold, so you've got to use energy or make energy to warm yourself back up again. So sometimes for people who hate gyms or have got injuries, or are very obese or embarrassed or whatever, doing cold thermogenesis is really helpful because you can sort of have your own little workout, and it's another way to use up calories and energy without massively stressing yourself out in a workout. And it's actually very good for anti-aging because it sort of compresses the mitochondria and the electron transport chain. It also compresses sort of collagen and stuff, so it's really good. Cold face plunges and things are good for collagen and skin. So that's
Mm.
another benefit to cold thermogenesis, because it can help people get into ketosis quicker, because you can imagine it's like a metabolic boost. It makes people more insulin sensitive. So I think it's really helpful to couple that with keto as well. But like everything, if you do too much CT, it can be stressful, and people, no matter what, people will always think some is good, therefore lots must be better, and then
So what would you recommend?
work with
Like a
that.
few times a week or?
Oh, it's there's so many different protocols. I think it depends on the person and the temperature of the water, how long. But basically, anything below body temperature is CT. Just drying yourself in the air without a towel, that's CT, and that's what
Mm.
some people do to start with, who've got, say, thyroid issues or very unwell. Because if somebody's not is very unwell, or has adrenal fatigue, jumping in a lake probably isn't the best idea, so they'd have to do it more slowly. And there's all
Right.
sorts of things. People sometimes just have a bath that's not super cold. They just get in it, and you can get like cold vests, and there's a whole world of cold
Mm.
thermogenesis.
I mean, I can agree with you because my husband, he has a gym here and they have a cold therapy plunge pool and they
Oh
have
yeah.
a sauna.
Oh yeah.
So the members, they basically jump from one to the other, one to the other. They do about 3 rounds
Oh yeah,
and
that's called
then
contrast therapy. But
right.
ideally, ideally to get the full benefits of that, you want to be cold adapted first. So it's like being fat adapted, that
Right.
your body needs time to make appropriate changes and make more brown fat, which is another
Mm,
thing that cold thermogenesis does. So it's really important for diabetes. So it is
right.
better to get cold adapted first and
And
then
how do you
do the
do that? You just
contrast.
build up over time,
Yeah, you
like you
just
said.
build up. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, if somebody's reasonably healthy and they're not doing it for that long, it's just sort of, it creates something like a Fournier effect. Because the other part of that triangle is, if you added in lying out in the sun, you'd get the UV and the sun, then you'd get the sauna, and that's sort of very good for expanding the exclusion zone because it's in infrared, and then you've got the cold. So it's like a little triangle that you can do. But like anything, if you massively overstimulate people, sometimes they just feel rubbish. So you just have to make sure that you feel good after, not
Yeah.
worse.
I mean, I always do, and I do that little routine, and I have to say, I am absolutely ravenous afterwards. Like,
Mm.
so ravenous. I just need to eat a huge meal afterwards. It's
Oh no, that
like you
wouldn't
said,
surprise me, because
it's like
it's
a
like a
workout.
metabolic boost. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like a Fournier effect. It's like a massive metabolic boost, but you've always got to make sure that you've got enough energy status on board to be able to metabolically deal with that. So say somebody who was, we'll just use like a relapsing anorexic as an example. If they did that, it would completely blow them out because they just don't have the
Right.
reserves and the energy to do it. Whereas somebody who's just wanting to get ready for a, they just want to lose weight for a wedding, that kind of thing can really help. But like anything with your body, if you do stuff and it doesn't like it, you'll soon know. You'll feel awful, your cortisol go up, you'll get your body tells you, if you're doing something it doesn't like, you'll get told.
I've got a
And
really weird sorry, I've got a really weird question here, and I've got to ask
yeah.
it before I forget. So in my weird brain, this kind of makes sense. Is it easier for someone who's fat adapted to deal with that cold therapy and the contrast therapy? It's Because you mentioned
I'd imagine so,
energy.
yes, because their mitochondria are gonna be in a better state, and
That's what
what
I
you're doing,
thought.
yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah.
because and also, like I said, when you do cold, it makes it's like someone shouting bomb in a building, everyone runs out. So that's what the fat cells do. They kind of release their contents, and then if you're flooding the body with your own body fat, it's kind of used to burning fat anyway. So it doesn't. It's like, oh, good, more food. So
Mm.
I think it's that they kind of go hand in hand. You could always do cold therapy in order to build up to be doing a keto diet. That would work as well, because you're improving the mitochondrial function, improving because fundamentally it's about the mitochondria, the engine, not the fuel you
Mm.
put in. So there's different ways to prepare people's mitochondria for keto diets. But keto diets in themselves are going to make the mitochondria happier just because it's a less inflammatory fuel. So yeah, they're kind of linked together, definitely. But
That's
also I think people who are used to exercising in really sweaty places and saunas, because you want to be hot adapted as well. You want to be able, you don't want to just be cold adapted, because if you suddenly ended up having to go into a hot room, you'd go crazy. So you have to have good thermoregulation. And that's another sign of people when there's something wrong with them. They are either too hot or too cold, whereas children don't
mm.
care if they run around in the snow without gloves on, and then or even clothes sometimes, and then they don't complain about, oh, it's too hot. They actually they'll get they're more risk at burning because they're much better at sort of dealing with heat, whereas people who are not well get very upset about it being not being too cold or too hot because their bodies can't adapt quick enough to the temperature.
God, I've never made the link between being fat adapted and cold therapy, contrast therapy, whatever you called it. You just being able to be flexible and to be adaptable, and kind of training yourself to be more flexible
Yeah,
in every
exactly. And
area. That's what it
it's
is, right?
yeah, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most flexible, of the most
Mm,
adaptable
I love
person.
that.
And also it's like it's just normal that we're not supposed to just sit at 20 degrees C in the house all day. Our bodies are geared towards temperature changes because that's just how we sort of evolved. And it's also back to, we do need little stressors all the time through the day, like for a
Mm,
hormetic effect, but also on a mental health or emotional level, that we what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, kind of thing. And our bodies should be able to react to this change in information. Just to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, we change the energy of something, like make it really cold, and then the body processes that information and is able to quickly then make all of the correct changes in the body. So
mm.
we just feel fine going in the cold plunge, or we enjoyed the sauna, or we had to play tennis and it was really hot and it was sweaty, but we still enjoyed it and didn't pass
Yeah.
out.
So can I
And the
just
same with
ask
the
you?
food, about the fat
Yeah.
adaptation, that, if you'll get functionally insulin resistance if you just stay and never eat sugar ever again. So if you ate sugar like a piece of birthday cake, your body wasn't expecting it because you haven't eaten cake for 3 years. So it'll make a big, massive fuss about it. So I'm not saying, because I'm massively against sort of anything from a factory, but I think if people want to make things, just do it at home, or just eat
Mm.
sort of sweet potatoes, or fruit or whatever. But that's just sort of each their own when it comes to, like, food's the big sort of minefield war zone, so I tend to try and stay away from it and just talk about other things instead.
No, I see why. But can I just ask you a really quick question? Because I know we've been talking for quite some time, but
Mm.
and it feels a bit off topic, but it's still about keto. What if someone wanted to build muscle? So in the gym, people want, muscle protein is such a hot topic at the moment for men and women, for anti-aging and for general health and for metabolic flexibility. So would you say that keto is beneficial for muscle building, or would you say it kind of you kind of need carbs to help you build muscle more
Oh, no, I
efficiently?
totally disagree. I just think it's just
Oh,
about having a surplus of calories and
mm,
doing the workouts properly and timed well and sleeping well. And it doesn't really matter what you eat as long as there's enough protein.
okay.
And
So
so
protein's the
I've
key nutrient
Oh
there
yeah,
for
because
you.
I
Yeah.
used to do all sorts of weightlifting and stuff, and I even used to do stuff where I would do sort of fasting bits and then keto, and I've sort of gained muscle in sort of transitions. Like my trainer, we're really good friends as well,
Mhm.
used to just say, because we always used to say, is it possible to, like, people always want to know, can you gain muscle and lose fat at the same time? Because it
Right.
looks like you can. But yes, even doing fasts and things, I was able to gain muscle, but some people are just different. It depends on, just going back to the whole mesomorph, ectomorph, and endomorph, that somebody who's an endomorph may find it a bit harder with keto just
Mm.
because of their way the metabolism is. But the other two, the mesomorph and the endomorph, would have no trouble at all. But I think it just depends on the quality of the food, but it's also the workout as well, because
Yeah.
you have to provide the correct stimulus and information for the muscles to make them actually grow. You can't just take
Mm.
peptides and eat more protein and expect to be ripped. You have to like do the actual mechanical work as well. So it just comes back to what we were talking to right at the beginning, that the form and the biomechanics and the workout that you do is really important as well. And then it's not that difficult to, if people sort of gain muscle, the whole dirty bulks and all kinds of weird things that
Mhm.
people eat. So it's not something that's difficult. So I would say it doesn't really matter, because there are plenty of carnivore and keto bodybuilders, and there's plenty of vegan ones as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's about just, you need your body to be stimulated properly by the right exercise, and just have
Mhm.
enough energy, like a surplus of food, so it feels, oh, it's okay to build build this. But that's a whole other massive topic, sort
It
of
is a
muscle
massive
building in
topic.
women. But
Yeah.
I think women can build muscle at any age. I think psychologically sometimes women know they should have more muscle, but they don't want it really, because they think they might look bulky. So they've
That's
kind
right.
of, on a subconscious level, killed their gains per se.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. And that was a burning question I had because, I'm trying to build my muscle a little bit. And I just thought, God, if I go on keto though, am I just going to get really skinny? Like that's what my thought is in my head. But you've
But
just kind of cleared that up for me.
but also, because you live somewhere really sunny at the 30th latitude, I wouldn't think a keto diet in the middle of summer where you live is the
Right.
right kind of way of eating
Yeah.
anyway. Just because, what kind of fruit and vegetables grow where you are?
Oh, mangoes,
Yeah, exactly.
coconuts.
So they
Yeah.
grow, you live where the mangoes grow, so it would be a
Yes.
different way of eating. So yes, if you try to do a winter northern, latitude diet in the middle of summer when it's really
Mm.
hot, and then try and gain muscle, your body might not be as cooperative. But like I always say
Mm.
to people, why don't you do an experiment? And that's the only way to know. And then it won't be the food. It would be doing keto somewhere where your body is expecting mangoes because they're growing at that time, because it's very sunny. But even if someone lives somewhere sunny, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going out in the sun
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
right.
So just because
Yeah.
people live at the equator or live in Florida or California, and I just said, oh yeah, it's really sunny there, they're like, oh good, I can just eat all the carbs. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that, because you're sitting in blue light.
And they're getting the wrong information.
You've
They're
got
not
to
getting
go
information from
outside.
outside.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly. So that's
yes.
how it works. So that's the other thing, that people will say, "Oh yes, I'm eating seasonally and locally," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're inside all day, so your brain doesn't have
Yeah,
any idea
still
what season it
confused.
is."
Damn.
And then
It's
also
all
the whole
coming
thing.
together. I love it.
Yeah, the whole thing about picnics and eating outside as a family, or I'm massively into that. If you eat outside, because of what we were talking about before, of how blue light raises blood sugar, and then other things in sunlight help to regulate it back down, people can eat. There's more wiggle room if you make a picnic or always eat your breakfast outside, because you're doing it in natural light, not blue
Mm.
light, which is obviously going to disturb the insulin and blood sugar system and cause more insulin spikes, and it takes longer for the blood sugar to go down. So
So
there's
can I just ask then? So let's say I'm going to the UK next week for a month. So just say the weather gets shitty again, which it usually does. Would you say that keto, that would be a good month to try and experiment and do some keto and see how it feels? Like, does the body switch that quickly, like month to month?
uh,
Can it switch day to day? Like on a cold day you do keto, on a warm day you don't do keto. Like what's the
Possibly. Yeah, the thing is, if you were more metabolic, what I would probably suggest is, because I always fly or travel fasted or in keto, so I would suggest going keto a bit before you go, because it's much better, because aeroplanes and airports are the best way on the planet to get completely dysregulated everything, especially blood
Mm.
sugar. So it would be a good way of traveling in a better metabolic state, and then you're arriving in a country where there's much less light anyway, because your body's used to all this light, and it would be more matching. But then, say if you wanted to sort of have a sandwich or eat some fruit or something, it is still summer, and we do have very long light
Mm.
cycles here, so we don't have as much intensity, but we have the length of day, like almost 16 hours a day of light. So there's sort of other nuances to it, but it's the actual intensity that's kind of important. So that would make a good experiment. So yeah, you could, coming back to the UK, that would be a really good time to try keto, because it would just make more sense, because you will have derailed your blood sugar and everything a bit with the traveling, and then the jet lag, which is jet lag is basically a messed up body clock, and people walk around with jet lag all the time because they've got like a messed up body clock. So
Yeah, I never thought of it that way before. Wow, God, Sarah, this conversation has been mind-blowing for me. Like I've made so many connections I've never made before, and I always offload my conversations to my husband afterwards, and this is going to be a good one.
oh,
We'll
brilliant. I'm
probably have a
glad.
beach walk and be like, listen to what Sarah said, and I'll just offload everything.
Oh yeah, definitely a beach walk, because you get the
Yeah,
ultimate grounding experience, and you can be
yeah.
barefoot, so that's really good for the foot mechanics.
Yeah,
The
they say when you're near
biomechanics.
water as well, like that's a really good way to get energy or something.
Oh yeah, especially waterfalls. There, or water crashing down a mountain. The
Mm.
sort of energy of the water, because that's a whole other podcast that goes like crazily. I just find interesting, but I think the take home message is to live in an abundance mindset, and there's a lot more energy in the atmosphere and the world than you think. You just have to tap into it. So yeah, it's been really fun talking with you as
Yeah,
well.
it's been really, really fun. I've really enjoyed it. How
Okay.
can people follow you now? Like, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, I go by Busy Superhuman
Yeah.
online, and I've got a YouTube channel for long form
Mm.
and podcasts. Then I've got Instagram for pictures and reels. Then I've got Substack, and I've only recently started the Substack, so it's kind of not. I started it right from the beginning and tried to make it as best I can as
Mm.
let's walk people in from the beginning. Because yeah, you're right. Some of the Instagram, because I've been making posts for ages, some of them are kind of completely off level, and then some of the podcasts are sort of just general, and some of them go really deep. But
Yeah,
and I sometimes use Twitter. I don't really get that as much, and people can reach out to me. I'm sort of pretty easy to find and get a
yeah,
hold of for people who want to watch videos or look at pictures or read.
yeah. Fabulous. Well, I'll put everything in the show notes for everyone. And it's been so fun talking to you. Thank you
Oh
so
yes,
much.
likewise, Tam. We'll have to do it again.